Hi, I'm Holly from Hollie's Little Cakery, and today I'm at Kensington Scott and I'm going to be showing you how to make these Mother's Day cookies, which is only a couple of weeks away. So first we've got our stand mixer, which I prefer to use. You can use a hand mixer, but it will take slightly longer. So we've just got 6 basic ingredients here, nothing too fancy. We've got plain flour, which I've already weighed out. So this is 460 grams of plain flour with 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we have caster sugar, which we are going to use 1 cup or 225 grams. We're going to place that into our stand mixer with our butter. And here we have our softened butter. We're going to put 1 cup or 225 grams of softened butter into our mixing bowl. So you need this to be nice and soft. If it's too firm, it won't mix properly and you'll end up with a really tight dough, and you don't want that. It'll be really hard to roll out. And if it's too soft, then it's going to be too liquidy and your cookies will just sink and go flat. So we want them to hold their shape. So now to our butter, we're going to add 1 cup of our caster sugar or 225 grams. And then my favourite, vanilla extract. So for me, no cookie is finished without vanilla. So we're going to add a glug of that, around 1 tablespoon. So in our bowl, we now have our softened butter, our caster sugar and our vanilla extract. So we're going to put that in our stand mixer and just let that beat together for around 5 minutes. Perfect, so that's nice and creamed. So I'm going to show you the consistency that we're looking for. You want it to be nice and light, kind of like making a sponge cake. You can see that there. So the texture has changed dramatically. It's now light and airy. And you need this for your cookies so that when they rise, they get that nice crumb. Otherwise it's really dense and they'll sort of break your teeth when you bite them. So give that a nice scrape around the edge. And then we're going to crack our egg into the center. We're just using 1 egg for this. And that goes. And then we're going to pop that on and then mix that through. So don't worry with this mix, it will curdle slightly. So when it's with a cake batter, you would worry with that. But with cookies, don't worry, as the flour is going to bring it all back together and you'll have a nice firm dough. That's perfect, that's all we need. So I'll show you this now. It does look slightly curdled, but we don't need to worry about that as we're going to add our flour next. Okay, so now we're going to turn the mixer back onto slow and we're going to add the flour 1 cup at a time or a large tablespoon at a time. So now you can see that the dough's come together quite nicely, but we've still got a lot stuck to the edge of the bowl. So now what we're going to do is the remaining flour we're going to add in by hand and we're going to knead it on the surface. So this means you can control the amount of gluten that's in your bakes. If you were to add it all now and put it in the mixer, you're going to get a really tight crumb, whereas if you mix it by hand, you can control the amount of gluten and you can make a lot lighter cookies. And this is also the messy bit. So we've probably got about 1/4 of the flour from what we started with left in the bowl. So we're just going to take some of that and sprinkle it on your surface. And then you want to turn out the dough from your mixer. Make sure you scrape out all the edges, as you can get butter that tends to cling to the sides. All the crumbs. We're just going to gently knead it all together. If it starts to stick to your hands, just grab some more flour from the bowl and add it to your dough. So it's not like kneading pizza dough. You don't want to work it too much. You just want to pull all of the crumbs in and just bring it together into one ball of dough. Again, if you over knead it, similar to pizza dough, then you'll end up with a really stringy dough and a really tight cookie, which means it's going to be really firm. So mine's still a little bit tacky to touch, so I'm just going to add a little bit more flour and just gently incorporate that too. Okay, so again we're going to lightly flour our surface, so with some of the remaining flour, you won't use all of it, and if you have, then it's going to be quite a dry dough, so just be cautious of that. We're going to take our rolling pin, and we're going to roll it to around 2 stacked £1 coins, which is about 1/4 of an inch. So just remember, every roll, turn your dough, and this minimises the risk of it getting stuck. So that's the perfect thickness. So now we're going to grab our baking tray and our cutters, and we're going to cut out our shapes. So I've got my baking tray and it's lined with baking paper. This is non-stick baking paper. And then my choice of cutters, we've got these blossoms here. We've got a larger one, a small one, and then we just have a scalloped round cutter. You can get these in pretty much even supermarkets these days. So I'm just going to cut those out and place them on your baking sheet. You want to space these out at least an inch apart from each other because they will spread slightly and you don't want them to get stuck together. Perfect. So there they are, all cut out and spaced out. And then we're just going to put these in the oven at 160 degrees Celsius for around 10 to 12 minutes until they're light golden brown, just around the edges. You don't want them too dark or they're just not as light and fluffy. Right, so now they're nice and golden around the edge, they're still nice and pale in the centre, you don't want them too dark, and we're just going to leave them on their tray for another minute or two until the base is nice and crisp. Okay, so once they've cooled down slightly, we're just going to remove them from the baking sheet and pop them onto a cooling rack. And this will just let some air circulate underneath and make sure you don't get a soggy base to your cookies. If you leave them on the tray too long, then the steam will circulate underneath and then you'll just get that soggy bottom. You don't want a soggy bottom. Okay, so now your cookies are nice and cool. They've had about 10 minutes, they don't take long to cool at all. We're going to decorate them. So to decorate them, I have a selection of these. These are just coffee stirrers that I've got in the studio, but you can use cocktail sticks or straws, anything that you've got at home. And they're going to be the stems of our flowers. And then here we just have, this is a scribe, but you can use a cocktail stick, and it's just going to stop our piping tips from getting blocked because we're using royal icing. So royal icing is a mixture of egg whites and icing sugar. You can find any sort of recipe you like online, or we do have one on our Instagram page in our highlights as well. And that's the one that we like to use. But whatever you want to use, feel free to use your own recipe. Royal icing is what they use on cookies, what they use on Christmas cakes, wedding cakes traditionally, and it's what you find they do the piping work with, filigree work. So we've got 2 tips here. We've got a number 2 and a 1.5 that we're going to use. If you don't have these at home, then just get a piping bag and you can just snip the end, start with a really small hole and then just get bigger when we go to the bigger piping nozzle. And then we also have my favourite, sprinkles, which we've got some nice motherly colours. We've got pinks, golds, whites, lilacs, my favourites. And then we have a paintbrush as well. So we're going to do 2 techniques here. We're going to do outline piping, which is these ones here, just the line piping, and then we're also going to do brush embroidery, which seems a lot harder than it is, and that are these ones here. So we're going to pipe around the outside, we're going to use a damp paintbrush and just brush in from the outside. I'm going to show you how. So we'll start with the outline first, and I've done 2 different types here. I've done the blossoms, which you can see with just the straight lines from the outside inwards, and then we have, where are they? The daisies, which are these ones. So we're just going to make those look like daisies, and yeah, we're going to go. So we'll start with the daisies. So you want a firm pressure on your piping bag. You want to tie it at the top and work from pressure at the top, not from the bottom, or it won't come out. So we're going to start with an even firm pressure from the centre of the cookie. Just squeeze and lift. And that's your simple outline. So we're going to leave that for a couple of minutes now, just to set slightly, and then we can go back to the centre. Okay, so now we've done our daisies, we're going to move on to the blossoms. So for this, we're going to use 3 spikes on each of the petals. So the first one, we're going to hold down, make a little blob, and then draw away with even pressure. So now I'm going to change my tip into the larger tip, which is a number 2. And if you don't have piping tips, just cut a larger hole at the end of your piping bag. And then I'm going to show you how to do brush embroidery. So, again, even pressure. We're just going to pipe a line around the outside of each petal, and then we'll use a damp paintbrush to brush it in. So this one doesn't have to be perfect. And then a paintbrush. You're going to dampen it slightly. You don't want it too wet, or it will just dissolve the icing. And then we're carefully going to brush in from the outside, and you get this really nice feathered look. And then repeat with all of the petals. Okay, so now using the larger tip still, we're just going to add a centre of royal icing to each cookie individually, and then we're going to plant them in sprinkles. So, my favourite way of doing it, you don't want to touch the icing that's already on there too much, or it will just come apart from the cookie. So what I like to do is just pour some sprinkles in your hand. You pipe a blob onto the cookie, right in the centre, and then with a flat hand, just push the cookie in. Perfect centre. And then repeat that with all of the cookies. So now to add them to your sticks or straws, whatever you've got, we're just going to add a nice amount of royal icing, and then just pop your cookie on the top. And then once these are all finished, you'll need to leave them to set for at least an hour before trying to assemble them into your jar. And then we're done. So give them, an hour or 2 hours, and then you can arrange them into your chosen pot. So here I've got one that I used to store, it was just sort of sprinkles in, I think. But you can use a jam jar, a mug, anything that you've got lying around at home, fill it with whatever you fancy. Sweets, mini eggs, anything. And then just pop your flowers in. And here they are, our perfect Mother's Day bouquet of cookies. And if you want to win the chance of winning all the ingredients that you need to make this at home, then all you need to do is make sure you're following both of our pages, like and share this post.